Okay, looks like we've got a good group on the line, and I'm sure others will be joining us as well. So I just wanted to welcome you all. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope you're having a great day wherever you may be. My name is Lindsay Streeper, and I am the Senior Director of Marketing and Communication here at Magellan Federal, and I'm going to be your moderator for today's webinar. We're very glad you've joined us and that you've come to learn more effective techniques for counseling military children. MFed Inform is an insight series that shares valuable health and productivity solutions to those connected to the federal government. To get to the blog with articles, webinar replays, and resources, you can definitely go to the URL you see at the bottom left of your screen, and that's at mfed.info/inform. And once you get there, be sure to subscribe, and you'll be the first to hear about new available topics we have, such as webinars like this. We'll have other things as well as articles and other resources for you. And everything is free and open to the public on that URL. So before we get started, there are just a few things I did want to mention so you can get the most out of your time with us today. This webinar is being recorded for all future on-demand viewings, and anybody who registered will receive the replay along with any resources we send out after today's call. Your lines are muted, but you can ask questions at any time using that Q&A button right there on your Teams window. So thank you all again for joining us. Let's go ahead and get started, please. Next slide. Perfect. So before I turn it over to the panelists, I did want to provide a brief overview of who we are, because some of you may be unfamiliar with Magellan Federal, but we're very glad you found us. We have team members all over the world at government installations and agencies, and our team delivers sensitive, complex wellness services and productivity services to the federal government. So our mission, as you can see here on the slide, is to inspire healthier, more productive communities by delivering innovative, total well-being solutions to the federal government, military personnel, government employees, and their families. So it's a really lofty mission, and one that I know the team on the call really enjoys being a part of, as well as myself here. And so what I will do now is I will turn it over to our first presenter, Paul Terbarelli, and he will take you through what we're going to talk about today. Thank you all for your attention. And Paul, over to you.
Thank you so much, Lindsay, and good afternoon, everybody who's joining us. My name is Paul Terbarelli, and I joined the Magellan Federal in 2021 to support the Military Family Life Counseling Program as its Child, Youth, and Behavioral Director. I'm a licensed independent clinical social worker in the state of Rhode Island and hold an endorsement in infant mental health as well. I received my bachelor's from the University of New England and my master's degree in clinical social work at Boston University. I have been practicing for over 30 years, working as in counseling and in program management working with children, youth, and families in a range of settings, including medical, early childhood education programs, and residential care for adolescents. I will later be sharing some information on military culture, suggested counseling interventions, and other resources. But before that, I am joined by my two incredible colleagues and practitioners who will provide some more specific information around permanent change of station and deployments. Ms. Kiona Baker will be speaking shortly. She is based out of Anchorage, Alaska, and has been with Magellan Federal in the MFLAC program since 2017. Kiona started off as a CYB MFLAC who worked with children at CDCs as well as with students in middle and high school, where she supported military children and youth. She transitioned to a regional supervisor and successfully supported a team of MFLACs. Recently, she was promoted to our business innovation team as a clinical project manager, where she supports the entire MFLAC program. Kiona obtained her bachelor's degree in social work from Austin State University and received her master's degree in mental health counseling. Kiona currently holds professional counseling license in the states of Georgia, New York, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Alaska. While accomplishing all these professional milestones, Kiona is also a spouse of a 20-year military retiree, and together they have 3 incredible children. As a family, they have all experienced and navigated through 4 deployments associated with Operation Iraq and Enduring Freedom from 2003 to 2012. These experiences have instilled a deep commitment to supporting military service members and their families, aligning with the mission and vision of the MFLAC program. Susan Trotman, who's also will be speaking soon, is a regional supervisor and acting regional director for the Military Life Counseling Program. She oversees an incredible team of MFLACs who support multiple locations in the Virginia area, where she and her team works collaboratively to ensure service members and their families are adequately supported with services, resources, and counseling as they overcome the hurdles of military life. Prior to this role, Susan was a successful and well-respected MFLAC who worked with both children, youth, and adults at multiple locations across the country. She was extremely excited when she found the MFLAC program and the model, which aligns with both her personal and professional dedication to supporting those connected to the military. She holds her bachelor's degree from George Mason University and her master's degree from Virginia Commonwealth University. While being an incredible practitioner and leader and advocate for those who need assistance through trying times in life, her most incredible work and experience is that of being a military spouse and a mother. Next slide, please. And the agenda, just quickly, that we'll go over is Susan will speak to permanent change of station. Kiona will talk about information regarding deployment. I'll speak to some information regarding military culture and counseling interventions and resources, and then we'll have some time for question and answer. I will pass it over to Susan right now to start to review information on permanent change of station. Oh, Susan, you're on mute.
Sorry. Thank you, Paul, for that warm introduction. I am going to talk to you guys now about permanent change of station, also known as PCS. I'm going to talk a little bit about what the family goes through so you can kind of get an understanding of what the family piece of it is, and then also ways that we can help work with our kids as they are going through this process. So next slide, please. So PCS moves, you get official notification. So the families will receive official orders and the time frames vary. Sometimes it can be 6 months out, sometimes it's 3 months out, and sometimes you have received orders and you are in the process of moving one place and you actually get orders and you end up moving somewhere completely different. So even though the time frames vary, the process stays the same. Next slide, please. So planning your move. So the family gets their orders and they look at, where are we going? You know, are we moving close by? Is it a state away? Is it 2 states away? Are we moving across the country? Are we moving across the globe? Are we going to maybe Oconus areas, Germany or Asia? So really looking at where that move is going to take you and then reaching out to the family service centers. So all of the branches have a family service center that are on the installations that can support them. So like the Navy has Fleet and Family, Army has the ACS building. And why the families can go to these buildings, they can help them make a list and figure out a plan of action that's going to help them really be successful in this moving transition. One of the things they will tell these families during these meetings is to make sure to keep out those important documents, especially if you have kids that have IEPs or 504 plans, because in the moves, things can get delayed, they can get misplaced, and you're going to want to have those important documents with you, as well as their physicals and their shot records and their birth certificates, because those are pieces that you need, and you'll need to have them where if you're registering for school at the next location or finding new doctors. Once you get the orders to, the family will meet and figure out, what is our plan? You know, is the service member going to go by themselves or are we going to go as a family? If we're going as a family, are we living on the installation or are we living off of the installation? And each location is very different. Sometimes there's a 9-10 month wait list just to get housing on the installation. So it may not be an option. And then in other installations, you may have to live on installation. It's not an option to live off. Also pets. In some places, you may not be able to bring your pet with you. So, what does that look like for our kids and families? Pets are our family, and if they can't take them with them, what does that do? Or sometimes they can take them, but there's a quarantine process. So trying to figure out that and maneuver that and making sure the pet gets all of their shots and blood work done in order to be able to go with the family. And then last but not least, just making sure that if the family does have special needs and accommodations, that this new location is going to be able to meet that. So next slide, please. So during the move, oftentimes our families are living without their belongings. So it's so important that the kids keep something that's comfort to them. So if it's a blanket or a stuffed animal or a toy or a book that they really enjoy, keeping that out so they can have that with them along the whole process. Oftentimes the family is very busy trying to find housing, childcare. Again, another could be 9, 10 month wait list on the installations for the CDCs, trying to get into schools and doctors. So let the school know, we want our families to reach out to the schools and let them know, hey, we are in the middle of moving. Let those coaches know on the school teams that Johnny may be having a hard time because we are in the process of moving. And then for the kids, as they're going through this, let's make this fun for them. Research this new location. Where are we going? What are some fun things that they really like to enjoy? So, if they like to go hiking, is this new location going to have a lot of hikes? If they like to play basketball and like warm weather, are they going to Hawaii or are they going to Alaska? And how can we get them excited about Alaska and the culture? Sometimes there's a fear of the unknown, and the more information that we can provide and help them with can really help them along on this journey. Processing the emotions and the stress. There's feelings and it's okay to have these feelings. That stress is not always bad. But how can we manage this? How can we help them through this? So who can they talk to? Great resource is their counselors at school. If they're lucky enough to have MFLACs at school, having them reach out to their MFLACs at school, their coaches, other kids, connecting them with people who are at their new location. So if they are moving, let's say to Hawaii, reaching out to that school in Hawaii and seeing, do they have an MFLAC there? Do they have a counselor there? Do they have a club there that we can connect them with ahead of time so they can get excited? One thing that military kids seem to really enjoy and they try to do in the schools is having lunch bunches, and sometimes those lunch bunches can be around PCSing or other military life situations that are happening. And I remember one of my MFLACs recently told me she was meeting with a student and he said, you know what? The best thing about being a military kid is it's our lunch bunches. And that just really warmed her heart. And it really shows like getting them connected with kids that have this commonality, that have these similarities, can really help support each other. And sometimes in these lunch bunches, we may have a student that's moving to Australia, but there's a child that just PCS into the school that just came from Australia. So they can support each other and connect each other with fun things to do at both locations. Another fun thing to do, especially in the school system, is doing rock gardens. Having kids paint a rock. Military kids rock, and they do, and maybe they could paint a rock and leave it at their school. So it kind of gives them that sense of belonging at that location where they were at. We've had different places that have coined kids when they get ready to PCS. Oftentimes their service member family, when they do good deeds, they will receive a coin from command. We can coin our kids. They're serving too, and we want to show them how proud we are of all this things that they have done. Handwritten note. That's something they can take with them. I'm so proud you did a great job. You really have excelled at math, or you really helped out your team playing baseball, whatever it is. Be handwritten. We've kind of gotten away with that with the cell phones, but it really does mean a lot. Setting up pen pals, providing them stress balls or resources that they can physically take with them to this new location. So if they are struggling, they have someone they can reach out to and really listen to them. What do they need? Each kid is very different. Some kids would really appreciate a countdown, making the chains or having an M&M jar where they can eat an M&M to count down the days, or even crossing out the days on a calendar. But for some kids, that can be very overwhelming and stressful, and that wouldn't work. So just figuring out what's going to help them figure out how to maneuver this journey as successful as possible. Next slide, please. So, new location. The family we've been talking about have now finally made it to their new location. Oftentimes, they are living in a hotel without their home goods. They're possibly beginning at a new school in the middle of the school year that has a different curriculum that they weren't learning. So, how can we help? Is there an ambassador club at the school? Is there a Bears for Bravery at the school? Is there Anchored for Life at school? What resources can we connect them at the school to help them feel more connected and help get them adjusted? Finding new clubs. Maybe the school team has already had tryouts for baseball, but are there clubs in the community where they can play baseball? Get them interested in something that they enjoy doing. So this isn't as a horrible experience for them. It can be something fun. The family, if they've moved, especially further apart, they may not have a lot of family support. So how can we connect them to family groups, churches, somewhere where they can feel supported and get the resources they need? This is an emotional time, good, bad, or indifferent. There's a lot of working pieces that are going on. So just reminding the family to take it one step at a time. One day at a time, we got this. How can we focus on these positive aspects of this new location? Because sometimes it's very easy to focus on the negative and we want to keep it going positive. Sometimes the service member is not there to help during this process. They may have to go back to work. Maybe they are already on TDY or having a deployment. So how is this family connecting and meeting those resources in the community when that service member is not there? Unpacking things. Oftentimes, when we get our belongings back, it's unbroken, there's things missing. So, how are we picking up the pieces after that? How are we trying to fit in this new location? Is there a different language? Do we need to try to find ways to learn this new language? The culture, is there different food? How can we get excited about this? Navigating the areas, right? It can be really hard. It can be difficult just finding the commissary or the grocery store. So, trying to help these families find these things. And then again, social media. Social media can be really, really positive. It helps our kids stay connected to their friends back home. They get to see what their kids back home are doing, but it also can be really bad because they may not have this friend support at this new location and they're seeing all of their friends have fun. They're seeing all their friends going out, moving on without them, and it can be really hard. So we just kind of need to keep track of that social media piece. Next slide, please. So here we are. This family, they have gotten settled at this new location, right? They've established this home. They've made friends. They have their support systems. They are feeling really, really comfortable. They found their doctors. They found their favorite spots that they like to hang out on the weekend and their restaurants and the food. They're learning the language. And what happened? It's time to PCS again. So next slide. So the process starts all over. So everything that we just talked about kind of starts all over. And military connected kids, they say, change school on average of 6 to 9 times between the grades of kindergarten and high school. And that's a lot. And our kids are amazing and resilient and strong, but it can be hard for them. So just reaching out and helping them learn as much as they can about that location, providing the support and talking to them can be really, really helpful. So that was my very quick snippet of PCS and the process and how we can really kind of help our kids through it. And now I'm going to get ready to turn it over to my partner who's going to talk about a different transition, Miss Kiona Baker.
Thank you so much, Susan. Now we've heard an abundance of information about the PCS cycle. I'd like to explore the deployment cycle. The deployment of our military personnel is an anticipated occurrence in our military community. This event can elicit a range of emotions and behavioral challenges in our children and youth. And so today, I want to focus on identifying some of the specific stressors that are experienced by our various age groups, and also hopefully provide some strategies for effective pre-deployment, deployment, and post-deployment preparation to minimize or alleviate some of those stressors in our children and youth. Next slide, please. So, in preparation for deployment, providers and parents can work to employ several age and developmentally appropriate strategies to facilitate successful separation. For instance, in the case of our young children, scheduling pre-recorded messages or stories and nighttime routines from the departing parent can prove to be really beneficial. Before deployment, equipping those children with coping strategies and resources such as feelings identification, breathing techniques, and calming strategies that are appropriate for their age can be a proactive approach to helping them deal with some of the emotional and behavioral changes that might surface. Additionally, creating age appropriate mile markers can help the child understand the duration of the deployment and prepare them for the separation more effectively. These are just a few of the strategies that we can use with our younger children to help them be better equipped for the separation. As our children begin to mature and gain a better understanding of the deployment process, it may be a great idea to explore alternative pre-deployment strategies during the preparation phase. In particular, with our teens and adolescents, involving them in the overall process of preparation may be really beneficial. Engaging them in discussion surrounding the deployment and including shifts in the roles and responsibilities in the home may foster better understanding of the separation. Also, for our teens and adolescents, it may be great to help them gain a deeper comprehension of the deployment location for their awareness, and allowing the teen and adolescents to actively participate in creating the communication plan with the departing parent can also be a great help. Exchanging keepsakes between the child and the deploying parent may also assist in maintaining that parent-child connection during the deployment phase. Our families can establish well-defined communication strategies in preparation for the deployment, which can hold vital significance in reducing the level of stress of the non-deployed family members. Activities such as short journals, emails, or video clips can be a really good strategy for maintaining consistency in communication during times where there is no physical communication with your deployed person. Creating rituals can help maintain the bonding and connection during the period of deployment and can prove to be very invaluable for our children and youth. Having a family care plan and establishing a really robust support system can also prove to be really helpful in reducing the stress of the deployment in our children and youth. Next slide, please. So now that we've talked about some of the strategies that might be beneficial during the preparation phase to decrease some of the stressors in the children and youth, let's look at some of the emotional and behavioral changes that we might see during the deployment. So emotional and behavioral stressors may present in a variety of ways, especially with our preschool aged population. The parental deployment can elicit some behavioral problems such as tantrums. You may see fussiness, defiance, or aggression. These children may also demonstrate some problematic attachment behaviors such as avoidance or difficulties separating from their parent. They may exhibit some internalizing symptoms such as irritability, sadness, or withdrawal, or externalizing symptoms such as noncompliance or opposition. There have also been some studies that have suggested that children in this age range may have increased well-child visits during the deployment phase. When we look at our school-age children, they may develop some anxiety symptoms and some clinically significant psychosocial issues that can take the form of social adjustment or neuroticism, such as tendencies toward anxiety, depression, and self-doubt. You may see some introversion and avoidance. The parental deployment can also trigger some internalizing symptoms, such as feelings of loneliness, sadness, and stress, as well as externalizing symptoms such as hyperactivity, aggressiveness, opposition, or even impulsivity. When we look at our teen population, dealing with parental deployment may involve more significant emotional difficulties. We may see some academic declines or just a feeling of an overall lower quality of life and depression. In addition to this, our teens typically will demonstrate some of the same internalizing and externalizing symptoms that we see in our school-aged population. Having some of the strategies that we identified earlier in the presentation during the pre-deployment preparation can be great in reducing some of those stressors in our children and youth. And later in the presentation, we're also going to highlight some additional external resources that can prove to be very beneficial during the deployment and reintegration. Next slide, please. So planning reintegration. Planning reintegration is a critical part of the entire deployment process, and it involves several phases, starting from our pre-entry, and sometimes the reintegration can last throughout the entire first year after the deployment. During the pre-entry phase, the essentials are setting realistic expectations, making sure that we're focusing on completing small and short-term tasks, as well as having contingency plans in place to address potential delays, because we all know that with deployment comes potential delays with redeployment. During the reunion phase, a range of emotions may be present, and discussing feelings of uncertainty should be encouraged. It's really important to talk to our children and youth about the reintegration as a process versus a singular event. It may prove to be really beneficial to plan for the adjustments in the home and for the changes in the environment as a result of the reunification process. When we think about the first months, face-to-face communication and connection may be a challenge that needs to be recognized and addressed. It's important to allow your children the space and time to talk. So much can occur in that year of a deployment. So recognizing and developing strategies to adapt to those changes with them and monitoring for the behavioral changes is going to be really important during the reintegration phase. As those initial months go by, you may see that the children and youth find increased stress levels and frustration as they begin to return to their old routines or even when new routines are being created. And during this time, focusing on communication, decision making, and stress management can be beneficial not only for the children, but for the family as a whole. It's really critical to recognize the potential effects of parental deployment on our children and youth and provide appropriate support to help mitigate those effects. So we want to remember that these impacts do not end when the service member returns home. And in some instances, the need for support is just beginning when the reintegration occurs. So by understanding the behaviors that might manifest, we can provide targeted interventions to help the children cope with the changes in parental deployment and the reintegration. And this support is going to help ensure that our children are happy and healthy and resilient in the face of adversities. Next slide, please. So, when considering optimal strategies for supporting our children during the reintegration phase, it may be advantageous to plan special reunion activities with our children and youth and to allocate specific time for them to express their thoughts, their feelings, and their concerns related to the deployment. Additional support for the children may include demonstrating an understanding of their schedules, their interests, and their personalities, and the changes that have occurred, as well as making a concerted effort to exhibit flexibility and adaptability in response to those changes. In closing, investing in the practices that we've talked about makes it possible to facilitate the child and youth successful navigation during the entirety of the deployment process. So next, I'm going to turn it over to Paul, who is going to highlight some of our military culture.
Thank you so much, Kiona. Today, I'd like to review some information to help counselors who may not be familiar with the overall military culture and how they can use some of this information when individualizing their counseling interventions when working with military connected children, youth, and families. Next slide, please. When considering the unique aspects of military culture, it's important to consider some of these values and norms within military life. For military families, they value the overall mission of the military and want their family member to have everything they need to be as successful as possible in their roles. Military families often weave the values of no one being left behind, and that each member of the family has a role in caring for each other as being extremely important, and that there is an overall understanding that sacrifices may need to be made to support the service member to succeed. Sacrifices are an expected part of military life and also a cornerstone of military culture. Military families thrive when they can balance the opportunities and the challenges that military life brings with it for each member of the family. When families can maintain some consistency in their daily lives, when inconsistency happens, they may be able to cope better overall. Military families can either live on or off installations. When children and families live on installation, they are living in a community with members who have similar values and norms. The community may be more of a close community to its members, especially when you're living overseas, where most of your time is spent with each other on location. Due to this, there can be closer connections socially within the community and its members that can provide additional supports for all military connected individuals. There are many resources and supports specific to this community that are right there on base or installation to be accessed and used. On the other hand, when living off installation, military members often try to integrate themselves between two cultures, that of the military and that of the community that they're living in. This can provide an opportunity for a better work-life balance by dividing time between the two. For those living off installation, there may be additional access to supports and opportunities both on and off installations, which can help for all members of the family. It is important to note when the two communities, meaning the military community and the community around them, do not complement each other or support each other, the members may face added stress or conflict within their lives. As we're talking about living on and off installation, let's consider some differences when it comes to attending school on and off installations. When the school is on installation, its culture is shaped by both the student body and the education staff fully understanding the nuances of military culture and life. Policies, procedures, and individualization have military culture weaved into them, often leading to less cultural challenges for military students and their families. When we consider the education culture off installation for our military connected children, we must consider those two competing cultures. At times, these two cultures may clash. Asking questions such as, is the military student population a minority or a majority, is important when looking at the student body off installation. Does the community have a supportive relationship or conflictual relationship with the nearby installation and its members? This information can help counselors to understand any additional conflicts or pressures military students and families may be facing. Students may often feel that they are faced with competing demands between the two communities, which can make assimilation difficult for them, especially for teenagers. Lastly, I would like to quickly just look at the history of the military over time and how that has affected its overall culture. Each war is different. How we engage in war has changed over time with what military members face and need to do when they are serving. More recently, within this history, we have seen service members being deployed multiple times, and the times from being in an active duty mindset and not being in an active duty mindset can be shorter and harder for the service member and their families to transition back and forth in. It is important to note today, some service members are actively serving and engaging in military activities that in the past were done away from their families. These service members may be commuting back and forth to war every day. When this happens, the service member may not have the time to de-escalate and recalibrate themselves to transition from service member to parent, spouse, and partner. Our military is always evolving. We have new branches like the Space Force that has been formed, specialized units that are always developing to address changing environments and risks, and the growth of and use of the Reserve and National Guard has changed over time, meaning that more individuals and their families are exposed to military culture. Next slide, please. As we wrap up this section of the webinar, I would like to highlight some quick suggestions and thoughts around counseling interventions, as well as some resources that we have gathered for you to consider after this call. Please consider these points when working with this population. Provide a space where children and youth feel comfortable to express themselves. Explore children's emotions and listen, respond to any questions they may have. Acknowledge feelings and thoughts that they may be struggling with. Use a military cultural lens and awareness when clarifying in concrete and developmentally appropriate ways regarding the feelings they may be feeling or having, how they may experience them in the past, or how they can cope with them when they are experiencing these emotions and feelings, and answer any questions to the best of your ability. Emphasize on an ongoing basis the importance of children and youth identifying trusted adults in their life and how to communicate with them when they have questions, concerns, or need help. Some summary on some counseling activities to consider when you consider using when children and youth include some of the things that have been shared that I'd like to highlight. Again, the use of transitional objects for young children that is self-identified by the child, such as a stuffed animal or a blanket, or an item that the child can hold on to that will be returned to the adult when they are reunited. Also, using laminated pictures of the service member or their family can be very helpful for children. The use of visual cues such as calendars, maps, and feeling posters can be very helpful both in and outside of counseling sessions. Again, as we spoke about before, not each intervention or activity needs to be individualized to the child to make sure that it's something that they can embrace and find that it's helpful. Child focus, pre-recorded messages that can be played by the child or service member can also be extremely helpful throughout separations. Child focus activities that then can be shared with reunited service members, such as pictures, journals, albums, compiling a welcome home box can be completed within counseling sessions. Other suggestions, especially for older children, are developing a playlist of music that can be listened to both by the military connected individual who may be away from the family, as well as for the child themselves. Keeping a log of movies or shows to watch or rewatch when the service member is back or when the family is reunited. Providing opportunities for peer connections through structured or unstructured activities or groups, as well as one-on-one sessions, can be extremely helpful when working with this population. For those anxious of new places and processes and process of transitioning, again, as spoken by both Susan and Fiona, having meetings with peers who have lived at or have been at the new locations is extremely helpful and well received by children. Children can ask questions and examples can be shared between peers. Another activity can be researching the new place that they are relocating to look for similarities or new opportunities that may be there. Lastly, these activities can be helpful no matter if the anxiety is around a different, moving to a different state, a different country, a new installation, or even when a child is transitioning within educational settings, such as from elementary school to middle school or middle school to high school. Next slide, please. Here is some resources that we put together for more information to tap into for a variety of resources and information to help those counseling military-connected children, youth, and families. Military One Source has a wealth of resources and information for both providers and for families. Military Child Education Coalition also has information that is focused to military children themselves and also their educational journey. 0 to 3 has developed specialized resources that speak to military families and their lives, as well as Sesame Street, which has a wealth of resources for children and youth for everything that comes along with both active duty military families as well as militaries who transition after retirement from the military. Strong Family String Force, Yellow Ribbon Strong Bonds, Installation Family Resource Centers, and Deployed Love are all resources that often can be found on installations and are key resources to support family members who are military connected. At this point in time, I'd love to pass it on to Lindsay so that we can move into any question and answers that may have come up.
Thank you, Paul, as well as Kiona and Susan. That we had a question in the queue that was answered. We do encourage you to put any questions there. I know they've covered a lot today, but I'm sure you might have some additional things you want to hear from the team. So don't be shy. You can go ahead and post them in there. Go ahead and close up the screen. Thank you. I'll bring on the team so you can see who you can ask it from here. And then we did have a couple that were submitted during, the registration process. So I will go ahead and we can start with those while the rest of you guys are thinking of other questions you may want to ask. So one of those first questions we got was, how do counselors help with changing family dynamics when one parent is away on deployment? And I believe, Kiona, you said you might be able to answer that one for us.
Sure. So counselors can facilitate open communication about expected changes that are going to happen in the family dynamics when one of the parents is away. They can also assist the family in creating plans on how they're going to address shifts in the environment. So that's something, just kind of planning how you're going to manage the discussions around those things. Counselors can also help to work with the families on effective communication strategies as well as emotion regulation to help them cope with the stressors that are going to be associated with that change, while also normalizing the discomfort that comes with change, because change is difficult for most of us.
Perfect. Paul or Susan, anything to add to that? If she covered it, that's great too. Just giving you the opportunity. Okay, great. Oh, Paul, did you want to say something?
No, go ahead.
Okay, I was going to move on to the next question. So another question we got, what resources do you suggest for children with learning disabilities?
So for children with learning disabilities, I think it's very important to always be working with, for military connected children, to be working with the resources that are in place through the military, if they're on installation and receiving their education, or if they're within the community. Always keeping any IEPs or service plans updated in being able to offer that in a transition, if a child's transitioning between locations. I think regarding counseling interventions, I think, again, when we're looking at the interventions, I think we need to best look at how do we individualize to help the child in interventions that meet their needs. If there are either developmental delays or other diagnosis, making sure and having the right expectations for what the child has the ability to do and reinforce what they have, what may be helpful for them. Often, again, visual cues may be more helpful for them. As reminders, posting, using calendars, using items that, or things that they can point to either express their feelings or how they're feeling, or to be understanding what has happened, what's going on now, and what will be happening next, can always be very helpful.
That's great advice. Anything to add to that, Susan or Kiona? Okay. We just got a question in the Q&A here. I like the idea of coining kids before they PCS. Can you give an example of what this might look like, and what kind of coin have students been given before?
So I'll take that one because I have had a couple of students do it. You can get little coins that just say you're super brave, or they may just be have something purple on there for a purple up for month of the military child. And it can come from the principal, it can come from a teacher, it can come from a counselor, where you're just really showing that child how special they are, how they've done a great job at this school, and it's something they can take with them at their next location and forever, kind of to hold on to. So it's really, each school does it a little differently. Schools may not be open to that, but if you're a coach and you're working with kids, or if you're a counselor and you're working with kids, that can be also another idea for you as you are wrapping up the sessions and stuff, to provide them a little coin when they leave.
Yeah, I like that.
And, just to add to that, there are several sites where coins can be created by any person. You don't have to have certain specific credentials. But also, if you are a clinician or an MFLEC counselor or a counselor in the school, creating activities, Susan talked about like the lunchbunch groups and how impactful and important those are. Having some of the other students in the groups to create coining ceremonies for their outgoing cohort is also a wonderful idea if there aren't specific coins available for the student, or that's not something that school does.
That's good advice. Yeah. Okay, we got another question. This is a tough one. When is daddy coming home? How can parents address this when the return date is not known, such as the situation right now in Israel?
So I will begin to speak to that. With some children who cannot understand the concept of time and we don't have specific dates, even starting out with your deployment, it may be beneficial to look at what can we do until parent comes home, whether that be a note each day or writing out something positive that was done to be able to share. So you're actually building up versus counting down and having to worry about the potential delays, because the majority of the time when we have reintegration, there are delays with when the flights are going to come back or what days and things like that. So I found that it's really beneficial to kind of do a counting toward versus a counting down in many aspects.
Yeah, and I'll springboard off that. There's so many different activities that you may do depending on, doing age specific. And it can be as simple as, for some children where it's unknown and they may be struggling is, and again, working with making a paper chain, they can put down a feeling, a thought, or anything each day and form a chain. And then when the parent comes back, they can talk about what they were feeling that day or what was going on. Again, on the other piece of it, being prepared, trying to be a little bit prepared. Again, if you have an object, especially a picture or something that's specifically connected to the military individual who is away, being able to have them use that or have that object and be able to incorporate that in their play. So if it happens to be a doll or a laminated picture of them, that they can also incorporate that in their play, and they can play out feelings and talking about what they're doing. And again, for older kids, maybe keeping a log or some information, I think really talking about or planning about those things that they may want to do once the service member is back and is integrated back into the family. Let it be watching shows that they want to watch together or rewatch together. Again, music, or even just kind of highlighting major milestones that they might have gone through that the service member might have missed, and being able to share that experience with them.
And I don't want to keep on because you guys mentioned so many great things, but also just to add with the chains and like the M&M jars, you can always add and take away without the kids noticing. So like sometimes we have to add a week or two onto the chain before the parent comes home. That's you can do that. But another thing that I think is really helpful is really that those handwritten things. So maybe you send a handwritten note to that parent, or they draw a picture, or they talk about what was fabulous this week at school. Not only is it great for the parent that receives it on the other end because it's something tangible, but it's so good for these kids to be able to write down and send it and then wait for something hopefully to come back to. So that can be a great process.
All
And
real
also,
good
oh,
things.
and also, I just to add on to that is developing a welcome home box. So again, activities that kids may be doing either on their own or with their or with professionals, but being able to put together things in a personalized welcome home box that they make, that then when the service member returns, that the service member can go through, and it may be they can, and hopefully they can go through it with their child so that they can talk about, oh, I was doing this with so and so when I did this. I kept this flower from when we did this nature walk, and those things that are important, and then they can have the ability to share that with their the military parent who's missing.
Perfect. Um, Here's a good question on, because it goes beyond children and it's their family unit as well. So can you provide some strategies to help parents connect with one another to provide an informal support system for that child while a spouse may be deployed and for themselves? Any adult suggestions quickly on that one?
Sometimes you can look in on base on especially larger installations where there are multiple opportunities where there are military spouse or peer support activities that are very formal, informal, where they are opportunities to gather again with individuals with your peer group who are going through very similar things, so that you can maybe have an activity together, a night out where people can, when adults can have conversations about what's going on and checking in, and maybe even some self-care activities that can happen at that period of time. It all depends, or finding those resources of building those opportunities, and finding those connections with like military individuals. And for some individuals, they may want to seek that support through other means, and that may be other supports in their lives. Maybe it may be through extended family or friends. It may be through a religious organization, a club, or a sport, that they have the ability to make those connections and build those relationships for that self-care and support for themselves. I think it's really important, especially I kind of didn't highlight it, that I always want to highlight when we're talking about families, military families, is that military spouses are always the ones that do the most sacrifice and will always make sure that their military member is going to have everything that they need. And then secondly, that their family, their children have everything to need. And they will often sacrifice their own needs to make sure that those are done and taken care of. So making sure that we acknowledge all the work that they do, the sacrifices that they have, and if there are those opportunities where they can just be able to connect with people who are at the same part of the journey that they are, can always be very helpful and supportive.
That was great, Paul. And I didn't know, Keo, and if you're going to talk about this too, but and not at every installation or every unit, but sometimes there are FRG groups that get together once a month, and sometimes the spouses will do a movie night, or they will do things to kind of keep everybody connected. And then the families can choose or not choose to participate in those activities. And then sometimes they just get together to say, hey, this is what we've heard, this is what's going on with the next steps. Hopefully, it's only 3 more months, and they're going to be coming home, and it's something they can get excited about and celebrate. So also to have families look into that to see if that's an option for them at the unit or location that they're at.
Yeah, I think that all of those were really great strategies. The connectedness, I think that, just speaking as a clinical professional as well as a military spouse, one of the most important things is to keep yourself moving and connected. And some of the strategies that we utilize for our children and youth are really beneficial for our parents as well. Counting up, ensuring that you maintain some level of communication so that you don't necessarily feel like you're doing it all alone, even when we have like those blackouts or there are down days when you don't communicate, maintaining some communication. Those video clips that I talked about, those short emails, the journals, even the welcome home box that Paul talked about, those are things that can be employed with our adults as well to help. And it will really help with the transition and the reintegration process that, sometimes that's where a lot of the actual work begins, is trying to reconnect after the deployment. So I think that some of the strategies that we've discussed with our children and youth may actually be beneficial for the adults as well.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Kiona. All right, well, I think we have time for one more question. It was more of a comment about an IEP, but maybe talk about the role of the school counselor with a student that may have an IEP. Is there anything you want to mention there or anything the counselor should be doing?
Right. So I think it depends on the role. Oh, go ahead. Susan, do you want to take it? I just want to make sure. So for MFLACs, for military family life counselors, they don't have the ability to be a part of the IEP process or to give feedback. They can be supportive to the family before or after those sessions. But if you're a counselor that's outside the military, it's really being able to kind of partner with the parent as best as they can to see what are the things that their child may need to be as successful as possible, and to be able to also understand that sometimes if there's an IEP in place in one school system, if they relocate to a different school system, how services are implemented can look different. So a military connected family may have XYZ services in how the IEP is designed and rolled out can look different in another school system, because that IEP will now have to be rewritten specifically to the school resources that are there. So I think it's very important to have our military families understand that process, and also be able to understand that they can advocate for and share with the team that's making an IEP the things that work for their child, because they know their child the best, and sometimes be able to share what has worked in the past and what hasn't worked in the past, to be able to have a part of that that plan being developed.
And I just want, just really fast, Kiona, sorry. Is the important piece is really just to take that IEP with you. We can definitely, the schools can make changes and adapt, but also knowing that there are resources on the installation, like the EFMP program, that can support our families if you have children with special needs, and making sure they utilize those resources that are available to them on the installation. Sorry, Kiona, go ahead.
No, you're completely fine, Susan. I think that another thing for our non-MFLAC clinicians that may be visiting with us today, one of the things with students with IEPs is helping to be a resource for the parents to understand the IEP and the resources that are available. But also, when you're partnering with the school, you really can be that bridge that helps to connect the school with home, and implementing some of those same strategies in the home environment, and supporting that other parent or the parents to ensure that that child is receiving as much consistency as possible. Because sometimes our children will get IEPs and there are things in place, and the parents just need that support to understand, okay, what does this look like in the school? And then how do I reinforce this in the home environment? And our clinicians can really be instrumental in helping to support that aspect of it.
All really great questions and conversations here. So thank you. We are running out of time, so we just wanted to say thank you again for attending. Hopefully that you learned a little bit of something today. You will receive, again, if you are registered, you will receive the replay, the presentation, and then that resource list that Paul was talking about. I did drop a link to our survey, so if you have any feedback whatsoever, suggestions for future topics, other things, you will get that in the replay email as well. But please feel free to fill that out so we can get your wonderful feedback. So thank you all for attending. If you have any questions you forgot to ask, you can always reach us at mfedinform@magellanfederal.com, and that you can get to that email on our website. So thank you, panelists, today, and to all of you for your attention, and have a great rest of the day, everyone.